Welcome to Insanity Fair. Looks like the cat wants to join in. Oh yeah, she doesn't want me to. No. Yeah, you can look at my video, Cats and Dogs, to explain why she won't, why she's resisting. Anyway, today I'd like to talk about political insanity, and specifically I'd like to talk about schizophrenia and political parties. Schizophrenic democracy, I suppose. Schizophrenia is the theory of the split brain, literally, from the Greek. Multiple personalities. It's a familiar idea to lots of people, even though the scientific basis for this is unclear. But the idea is that we have multiple personalities that make up our complex personality, and that at times of psychological breakdown, then these fragments of our complex personality can separate out. And so in extreme cases we have these split personality cases, which are actually very rare. However, I'd like to talk about something slightly different from that, which is the group schizophrenia, or the group multiple personalities, represented by party politics and democracy. Now, in Britain, we have the mother of parliaments, and we also have the mother of party political systems, in that we have political parties which have become really pretty stable, certainly by world standards. And there are three main parties. There is the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, and the Liberal Democrats. They've actually changed their names. They used to be the Whigs, then they became the Liberals, then the Liberal Democrats. And now what I would suggest is that this is not just a question of three tribes or clans competing for power, but these represent three aspects of the British personality, three components, if you like. So the Conservatives, the Tories, are conservative because we British people are conservative. We like the Queen. We have a royal family. It's very conservative, and all of the symbols of the sort of high Victorian age, are just integral to British life. Downton Abbey, whatever it might be. So that's the Tories, the conservative element, and we want everything to be the same, and we trust the traditional values. So we have old Etonians and people from Oxford and Cambridge in charge of everything, and yeah. Now, on the other hand, we have the Labour Party, which is obviously much more recent. It's a 20th century development, and that is the party of social democracy and social justice. And again, that's something that all British people understand. English people, I think we should probably have to say now, because the idea of Great Britain is, it seems to be breaking down. So let's just limit it to the English. The Labour Party, despite its name, was never just a party of labourers, of working class people, but it's had actual aristocrats and upper class people who've been involved in the movement, and it's as much an intellectual movement of educated people as it has ever been a system of working class organisation, although it was that too. Much less so in recent years. And again, it's an element of the British personality that we feel that people should have um, a fair chance, you know. And although we were the first industrialized power in Europe, and so we had you know, children working in the factories, and you know, very bad conditions for lots of people. We also came to recognise that it was a reasonable political project to tax the rich to improve the conditions of the workers. So we closed down the workhouses. We stopped punishing people for being poor. We stopped hanging people for stealing loaves of bread and so on. And so the Labour Party is the expression of that. The Liberals, well, it's a long and complicated history, but in recent times, the Liberals are basically people who don't want to participate in this right versus left argument or question, and so they're still well-meaning people, well-meaning. Well, they're called Liberal Democrats. They're liberals and they're democratic, and they believe in the system, and they're often seen as sort of woolly hat wearers, people who aren't terribly committed about one thing or the other, but still want to try and make a difference. Okay, now recently we've got two new political parties which have come on the scene. As I say, disregarding Scotland and Wales, which have nationalist parties, but we have the UK Independence Party, UKIP, and we have the Greens, who have one MP. Now, again, these are both highly legitimate movements at the level of the English population. And if we had proportional representation, they would certainly have a lot more representation in Parliament than they have. But we have this sort of damping effect of the first past the post system in the elections, and so they don't get to have much expression. But even so, then they're represented not as sort of outlandish extremists, but people who are already well accepted psychologically as being also part of this complex personality that the nation has as a whole. Now, the British system of parliament, parliamentary democracy, has many faults, but it works pretty well, and in particular it allows a great flexibility, possibly up to and including the dissolution of Great Britain. This is just not true in many countries. I've lived in 9 countries, and where I'm living now, for example, in France, we have complete political paralysis, you know, and the impossibility of change. Everybody knows that something has to give, but it's so difficult to effect any real change because of the limitations of the French democratic system that successive presidents have just found it impossible to do this, and nobody else has even the possibility of trying it. But let's look at something which is probably more familiar to a lot of people who speak English, which is American politics. And you see something which is the opposite of a well-functioning system, and is really what I would call schizophrenia, in that it's a kind of social disease. And that's where you have the two parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, and they hate each other. The political system at the federal level is reduced to this confrontation between Republicans and Democrats. Many people would say that there's very little difference between them, and that they're really just two different systems of corruption, with lobbyists and big business dominating at the federal level, and at the state level all kinds of pork barrel politics, as they call it, dominating. But from a historical perspective, there is obviously a difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. The Democrats were the pro-slavery party. The Republicans were the victorious Yankees after the Civil War, responsible for what's said to be the most corrupt period of American politics. And so they, within living memory, the Democrats have been transformed because they lost their traditional homeland in the South, and they've separated into the two groups that are familiar now, so that all kind of liberal intellectual types are all Democrats, and all of the pro-business, pro-corporate America, anti-tax, pro-gun people are all Republicans. But you can't really say anymore that this represents America as a whole. With a continental-sized country, it's difficult to talk about an American identity anyway, and having so many immigrant groups, there's a tendency to great fragmentation. But the two sides don't see each other as legitimate anymore. The right-wing media vilifies the Obama government, for example, and all of the Democrats as if they're some kind of criminals, as if they're secret Muslims come to take over the country, as if Obamacare is this terrible plot to destroy America. And the Democrats see the Republicans as a sort of fascist corporate conspiracy. And this sabotages any dialogue. Now, it's not only a political confrontation like that can sabotage dialogue. In my book, Politics, I have a section called The Cancer of Nationalism. And that too can cause a complete breakdown in dialogue. So that, to return to Britain, in Scotland now, the victory of the Scottish Nationalist Party, the SNP, is so total that there is no discussion taking place in Scotland. It's just this sort of monolithic ideology now, which is opposed to the whole concept of United Kingdom government. The most extreme example, though, in Britain is Belfast, and it's not so much a political confrontation, because there it's the religious confrontation between the Catholic and the Protestant areas. It's not based on religion, it's just that those are the labels that they themselves choose. And there is a very important element of religion in it, because the Catholic Church in particular provides schools for the Catholic population. And these people, they've actually built high walls to separate the Catholic and Protestant districts in Belfast, to prevent people from throwing petrol bombs at their neighbours. And that is unfortunately a level of confrontation. That's a very extreme example. But in many countries where the institutions of democracy are installed, because there isn't this kind of dialogue between political parties, the political parties which do arise are, well, I don't know, look at Zimbabwe, for example. The political parties can often just be organisations to prevent dialogue rather than to facilitate it. And under those circumstances, then quite clearly parliamentary democracy is not going to work. And this is what's happened in Iraq, in Libya, in many places where this project, this well-intentioned project of building democracy has failed. And I would suggest that what has replaced it, the diagnosis I would make, is that this kind of schizophrenia has defeated the democratic project. And as with schizophrenia in individuals, it's very difficult to prescribe any kind of antidote.